So I'd like to point out a couple of contrasting pairs which demonstrates the breeding history of wheat and some of its wild relatives. So what we have here is the Cultivar Bird, which is a modern development by Colorado State University. It's been very popular and very productive across the eastern plains of Colorado. Next to it here is what's called Kharkov. This is an old variety imported into the Great Plains by immigrants from Ukraine and Russia when they came here in the late 1800s. So this is what wheat would have looked like 120 years ago across Colorado, Kansas, and other parts of the Great Plains compared to what we have now. So the obvious difference is height. The old varieties were quite a bit taller until the Green Revolution wheats. And this is what happened in the 1970s, introduction of genes that reduced the height of the plant so that the photosynthetic material that would have gone into producing stems and leaves is now going into grain. That ratio of grain to vegetative matter we call the harvest index. So the modern varieties have a much higher harvest index, a much higher proportion of grain compared to the whole biomass, compared to some of these old varieties. The other thing is that these are so tall and these stems so flexible that a good windstorm is going to knock them over. So you have a lot of what we call lodging. And some of this, if it ends up on the ground, could not be harvested. It would rot or not be picked up by a combine. These shorter wheats have stiffer stems, and so they have much less tendency to lodge. So those are two of the big differences between old wheats, some of the so-called heirloom varieties, and modern wheats. Now here's another pair. This is A genome wheat. The A genome being one of the ancestors of modern wheat. This is the wild species, Triticum urartu, and you can tell it's very bending over. It's going to lodge pretty soon, and it has a characteristic known as shattering, where the seeds break off very easily from the plant. So a very important adaptation for a wild plant, because you would like the seed to be dispersed widely, but not for a cultivated plant. You would like to be able to harvest everything in a single seed head. This plant here is known as Ein Corn Wheat. It's one of the so-called ancient grains, which is receiving renewed attention. This is directly descended from this Triticum urartu. They both have forms of the A genome, but here we have stems that are staying upright rather than bending over. We have seed that is staying in the seed head, so it's going to be much more easily harvested. And we have an increased density of seed heads, so the yield potential here is greater. There's not much of this grown in the US, but it is still grown as a cultivar in parts of Eastern Europe, places like Bosnia and Serbia. So, a couple of examples of what has happened through breeding and selection of wheat and its wild ancestors.